Hello and welcome to This Week in Property. I'm your host Richard Swan, and in today's show it is all things Ireland. Yes, the Emerald Isle, the beautiful mysterious island across the sea. And it's about investing in Ireland because we're very lucky over with BMW. We're very, very lucky to know a lot of great people who are in the Republic, they're in the north of Ireland, loads of guys and girls just doing loads and loads of great stuff. And in today's show, viewers and listeners, you are lucky that you're getting to see one of the top superstars in that group. The one, the only, I call her the Taoiseach in waiting because that's how powerful and important she is. The young lady, Catherine Brennan. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Richard. Well, thank you very much. Very hard to follow that intro.
Not at all. We're going to have a lot of fun here. We're going to have a lot of chats, a lot of conversations. What's it like? What's it all about? Why is there differences? We know a lot of stuff over here in the UK. Property is property, of course. Investing is investing. We know that. That's why we do it. That's why we love it. But we also know that there's wee differences, there's wee regional differences, some even inside the UK, someone investing inside a big city like London, it's going to be completely different from some villages around about the Lake District, Some people who focus on HMOs, that's completely different from land developments. There's all these wee subtle differences. And when it comes to nations and even just currency, for example, that's a different thing. That's all it is. So that's why I'm really keen to chat to yourself about the world that you know a lot about, what you're in, how you're navigating your way through it, the differences that you see, the wee subtle changes that, oh, that's right, we don't need to do that here. Oh, that's right, over in the UK they have such and such. So it's going to be fascinating. But before we get into that, let's chat about you. Let's chat about Catherine. What's the deal? What's the story? How did she get here? What is the background to all this? Did she just pop out the womb and go straight into her first buy to flip? Or is it maybe a bit more of a scattered journey that took her to where she is now? So what's the story with you?
Well, I suppose I got into property initially. I probably always had a slight interest in property, or I always had an interest in any type of passive or semi-passive income. It's funny, when you're young, I used to always think I'll retire at 40 and I'll have a horse farm and now I tried retirement at 35. It's the most boring thing in the whole world. You're not mentally where you are when you're 65. Your friends are not all off work. So I suppose I was drawn always to the element that you'd have two incomes going alongside each other and that it was somewhat passive. Less passive, we discover, of course, as we get into it. It's not as passive as the ads suggest. So I, as a schoolgoer, I suppose, I grew up in rural Ireland. I'm from Mayo in the west of Ireland. And as a schoolgoer, I planned on going to college, wanted to do law or accountancy. So this job is actually a great mix of the two skills really now. So I went off, studied accountancy. I did teacher training in the midst of all that, all the little things you never end up mentioning to people. Did accountancy, and I'd say the year before I qualified, I bought my first house. And I remember at the time, I bought a house in Dublin at the time. So the multiples wouldn't actually be that different. Yeah, I suppose they're tougher now for first-time buyers. But this was pre-Euro. I was spending 63,000, but I was only earning 15,000. So the multiple was still the same stretch in a way as it would be probably now. So I had the perfect time. That was probably 1997, 98. So I had, unbeknownst to myself, arrived at a curve in the property market that things were just going up, up, up. You didn't really have to get it right or understand due diligence or deal analyzers or anything. Nearly anything you bought would turn to gold. Unfortunately, that doesn't carry on forever, as we know.
Indeed.
So that first place, and everybody I spoke to at the time almost discouraged me because it wouldn't have been a place I'd have lived in forever. I remember people even saying to me, oh, you can't live there. You're not from the area, and it would have been a tough enough area. It's actually cleaned up an awful lot now. you won't be able to live there. I mean, they just won't tolerate it. Whereas all I could see was that I could afford the deposit, I could get the loan, and if I took in 2 lodgers, so it was your typical 2 up, 2 down with the parlour room, which you could then call a 3rd bedroom.
Right.
But the 2 lodgers were more than paying the mortgage. So suddenly I had no rent, a little bit of a surplus, and I suppose my career was moving along at a reasonable speed as well, because just as I qualified, when I joined this company first, which is now they sold it to a multinational while I was there. So I joined as assistant accountant. There was an accountant, a finance controller, and a finance director. And they all left or were fired within my first 2.5 years. So I was busy at work, and the path was always clearing as well, which was great. I had a lovely boss who decided to move to Dubai. So then I became accountant. Then the financial controller was asked to leave. In an exercise.
This is how I see your path to becoming the Taoiseach. I'm telling you, it's on the cards, one by one.
He's under awful pressure at the minute. I wouldn't wish his job on anyone.
No, that's very true.
It's a very bad time. So then, and in the process of that, I suppose my then immediate boss, I got all interested in. These guys were called in to examine the work of the company, these management consultants. And watching them at work, I had always been looking around thinking there's too many of us here. Half of us could do the work if they just made us speed up a bit. So I found their work fascinating, watching how they rationalized and tested and measured. This is how many invoices come into an accounts department. If one of them takes 3 minutes, you should be able to do this in a day, which generally the traditional old business ways, you start with one person in accounts, and when he or she starts complaining it's too busy, you get them an assistant, and on it goes. But nobody is measuring or asking, is there a better way? So I eventually was the senior finance person, and I was probably only qualified 4 months at this stage. So some days I'd be sitting in my lovely big office on my own, and all of my friends were still in assistant accountant roles, thinking, gosh, what'll I do if anything really big happens here? I won't have a clue what to do, And then the company had an offer from a big multinational, SCA Packaging, which is kind of a household name. They were a packaging company, and so we had all that due diligence and everything. So it gave me exposure, I suppose, to areas of finance and accounting and business that most people didn't have. I was probably 26 now, but accountancy is a long, slow, so I was still only newly enough qualified. By now, I had my £63,000 house was probably worth 120. The prices were literally galloping in Dublin at this point. So I was able to equity release that one house, probably paid deposits on 4 or 5 more. So, but I still wasn't on huge money. I probably left permanent employment on only 35, 40,000 pounds back in the day. Because when I was qualified only about 18 months, I decided to set up my own practice. I mean, if a young one told me now they'd only 1.5 years experience and were thinking of offering their services, I'd be saying, no, you don't know enough. There'll be different challenges in different businesses. But I was generally moving house, releasing equity, and then it would look after itself. And I had not just no money down, but I was getting big lumps of cash back, which would sometimes buy another spare house. So I suppose by kind of 2006, I had maybe 8 or 9 properties in Ireland, but then I had stuff in Latvia, Lithuania, Spain, Turkey, everywhere and anywhere, because I was still reaching lending limits here, even though I had the deposits. You've a reasonably small circuit of banks.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was actually thinking about chatting to you today, the banks that were the real forerunners to us pre-recession are not trading at all in Ireland now, really. Bank of Scotland would have been where a lot of investors went to. They had tracker mortgages, they had interest only. They're not represented at all in Ireland now.
Interesting. Yeah, the lending side of it, I say that's one of the topics I want to jump into, that whole lending, understanding it, who's lending, loan to values,
Yes.
So where are you now? Because not only are you an investor, you're doing loads of stuff, doing loads of deals, but you're running your own business and things as well. What are you up to by helping people just now?
So through a long convoluted process, then obviously then the value of everything sort of fell out of the sky in 2008, but not immediately, which is what we'll see again now. And I had just got lucky and sold my practice as well.
Right.
So I had sold my practice to my own accountant, actually, who wanted to diversify, because my area was not actually accounts production, but it was management, time efficiency, test and measure everywhere. Because a huge, and of course, this is another thing we're seeing now, so many businesses that look successful are running at no profit. The fact that the doors are open and they're trading, everyone thinks, and maybe they've even very high turnovers. But so many places, they've no reserves. When some problem hit, there's nothing to fall back on. So I loved that area of work, but I probably loved the property more. It was very, very time committed, because I was by then doing I 10 staff, and I'd some senior qualified who were very, very good. But of course, what you find is everybody wants you yourself when they're under pressure. So I had maybe 14, 15 companies that I was in effect the senior finance person, and they were under money pressure a lot of the time. So you have very little time to go looking at houses and things like that. So I sold, I suppose, at the perfect time. Weathered the recession, and then discovered in solving my own problems, I realized, gosh, I sort of understand this negotiation business. And I'm an accountant. After that, I'd done the financial advisor exams, the company secretary exams, the insolvency exams. Maybe I could look after other people's cases. So I started to deal with insolvency cases. And that's something, actually, and I know we'll go through the comparison, that's something that works so differently in Ireland to the UK. And it's a ripple effect, I think, of that makes our market probably different. Because, in the UK, I suppose, once you're a few months in arrears, you're headed for repossession court. I was dealing with people all the time. So at the peak of doing that insolvency work, I still do some, but I don't have anything like the volume. I would have had 200 live cases on my desk. Now, sometimes you'd have a person with 10 properties, so that mightn't have been, it might have been 200 properties, but 170 clients, say. So it's very, very hectic trying to keep them all updated, trying to keep them calm, because the panic is worse than very, very similar to the current times. The panic is worse than anything that could ever actually happen, or the unknown is worse.
Yeah, that fear being worse than the reality.
Yes. Yeah. And the more time you're spending calming people down, you're not on the phone to the bank negotiating. You're on the phone saying, keep calm. You've been in difficulties for 4 years. I'm not going to sort it in 4 days.
Yeah.
Exactly. It takes time.
Yeah.
So I would commonly be dealing with mortgages that were, luckily for me, I suppose, I generally dealt with investments.
Mm-hmm.
Because by choice, and also because I preferred informal arrangements, which is basically a negotiation with a senior account manager in a bank, where we do have a system for formal arrangements as well. And the formal arrangements probably protect a family home more. So it's completely built to stop you being put out of your family home if it can be helped at all. But obviously the level of emotion is very high and they're really time-consuming cases. And actually some of the large firms in Ireland run them on a no-win, no-fee basis. So you can't compete with that when you're spending hours and hours putting together proposals.
No, definitely.
So I was in, I suppose, the landlord rescue zone. So then I'd had to get rid of all my own stuff at big losses and negotiate on those. And it's character building, to say the least. You don't always feel character, but I mean, sometimes you'd feel absolutely exhausted and worn out. And I distinctly remember in the beginning, the bank would ring every day. You know, you haven't paid your mortgages. And I'd say, but my clients haven't paid their rent. I can't fund. My monthly commitments were about €12,000. And I'd say my rents were gone down to 2.5 that we're paying. So you cannot fund that personally.
No, exactly.
So nowadays they're actually not permitted to ring you every day and pressurize you, because a lot of the law has changed around that here. But I suppose in this space of starting to of all my own stuff being gone within that zone of kind of, I probably didn't sell anything till 2011, 12, because we had a couple of years here where there was nothing being enforced because they didn't even know what they wanted you to do. So the bank were chasing you, but they didn't have a suggestion. If you couldn't collect rent and pay, they weren't sure what to do. Whereas obviously in the UK then, you'd be on your way to repossession court. But we have lots of mortgages 3 years in arrears here. We still have about 26,000 mortgages, I think the last time I checked, that are more than 6 months in arrears.
Wow.
So repossession is very slow in Ireland.
Right, okay.
And I suppose a lot of people think that's brilliant because it protects family homes. But I think the negative side we're seeing is lots of the banks who could trade here don't want to trade here. And it would bring rates down.
Right.
Because
there's always going to be pros and cons, isn't there, to every single situation?
They don't want to be here if they can't enforce their security.
Yeah.
You know, so where I deal with Santander in Portugal, and they're a great bank, and I'm sure you've Santander very active in, they don't seem to have any appetite to come to Ireland, because enforcing your security would take years.
Gotcha. And that insolvency stuff, are you still doing that at all, or did you?
I have a small volume of cases now.
Right.
And thankfully, I suppose most of the really the people I used to feel most sorry for were the accidental landlords. You know, someone would buy a place thinking they'd live in it, and then they'd maybe meet someone, have kids that couldn't fit into it, but they're not at all mentally equipped for the pressure they'll come under. Whereas people who sign up to be landlords or investors, I suppose they've some prep and some expectation that this might be pressurized. Sure. This might be difficult. So I've maybe only 20 live cases where would have had 200 at the peak.
Gotcha.
And those are generally bigger amounts of money, because they're ones that would have been given special conditions 10 years ago and they're running out now. Right. So we have to sell and settle or refinance and settle.
Gotcha. Okay. That's really fascinating, the whole thing, you know, the insolvency, how it's targeted different, and the regulation changes, and then, as you said, that's this ripple effect. It's amazing how all these things, you know, affect different parts of the puzzle, but it's all inside the one big puzzle. And it touches upon the first area I wanted to kind of chat to you about and get your experience and your opinion on, is the economy as a whole, you know, Ireland's economy, the Tiger economy, all these buzzwords and stuff. Because if someone could only grab me for 30 seconds and go, right, the UK property market, talk to me. But, you know, that's a big thing. It's a big, gigantic thing. Yes. But you could summarise it. You could quickly give away things like, well, we have a very bad supply problem in the UK property economy. Every government, for God knows how long, time after time, promise, they're going to build, and none of them have. And we've got a really big, and I've always had for a long time now, a big supply and demand problem. And that's behind our island economy. And that's always there, and that's bad because they made these promises. It's bad because people in some situations are really struggling to get a house. It's good in the sense that it gives that supply-demand thing, gives a structure to an economy to invest in. You can look at it loads of different ways. So in a very crude summary, I could throw that out as an example of the UK economy. If I had to do the same in Ireland, would it be the same? Would it be different? Would it be upside down? Because we hear all these things about tiger economy, massive crashes, just like the rest of the world. Negative equity is a big thing. You've mentioned insolvency. How would you try and kind of summarise the bubble to show that any differences between Ireland and the UK?
I would say exactly. We have a supply problem that's kind of location specific,
right?
Which is a bit frustrating. So even people, we don't accept in Ireland. I think in the UK people accept that you don't live in London unless you're a substantial earner.
Right.
They've sort of migrated out because they've had to.
Yeah.
But say the main homelessness problem would be really centred around Dublin.
Right.
But still, the people don't want to leave Dublin. It's where they were born and reared. And I see full empty housing estates in rural Ireland that the cost to finish would be minimal. Now, obviously, they've been empty 12 years. So these would have been Celtic Tiger developments that there was probably no real demand. Yeah. It was just demand that they were well marketed. Money was readily available. So they were probably sold off plan and never closed on. So they're sitting there. So while we have a shortage in the cities, we do still have a lot of unused stock.
Right.
Not even that derelict stock. I was just on a road yesterday, which I'm in the process of downsizing myself in rural Ireland, and I was on a road where my mum grew up yesterday, which is where I'm moving to. And as I looked around, parked, every second house is probably empty.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and it would be a lovely, it'd be a lovely, really close to town, close to shops, close to all amenities location. But so much of work is centred around Dublin. And I can understand that, I suppose, for people in big tech jobs and well-paid jobs.
Sure.
But I often wonder, when you add the cost of living, are they that well paid?
Right. Okay.
I done an exercise one day, and I think I posted on a LinkedIn post. What's the real cost of a €500,000 house?
Mm-hmm.
In Dublin, a €500,000 spend would get you a 3 or 4 bed in a nice area. You still might be terraced now at 500,000 even.
Right. Wow.
So it's expensive.
Yes.
And over the life of that, I think I then said, well, right, first you add interest, and that's double. If you're borrowing most of that, you're going to pay back $1 million over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So mortgage interest roughly doubles. And then our respective tax rate, for anyone who can afford that, they're paying 50p in the pound. They're paying 42p income tax and levies.
Wow.
So now they need to earn double the $1 million.
Yeah.
So they were talking about allocating a €2 million earn over their working life. And a lot of them then, when their working life is over, will say, Dublin is too crowded, I don't really like it here. I'm going to move to the country. And I think, what was the point of the last 20 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When they downsize, yes, they'll have a lump sum.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll have paid interest and tax on every cent of it.
Yeah.
But it's sort of the model by which people live in Ireland. They sort of accept you move to Dublin or you go abroad when you finish college.
Okay.
It's probably perceived that if you want to achieve anything, that's what you have to do.
Fascinating. The
Yeah.
Celtic Tiger, eh? It's a funny beast, the old Celtic Tiger. And when we mention Dublin, that's obvious to everyone listening, because I need to bear in mind we've got people listening from all over the world. We know Dublin, capital city, that's fine.
Yes.
Is it really, is that it? Is it Dublin and the rest of Ireland? What I mean by that is, I can look at Scotland and say, well, things are different between the city and the rural, but you've got Glasgow, you've got Edinburgh, you've got Aberdeen, you could maybe factor in Dundee as a city. Down in England, loads and loads of cities. We spoke about London, but there's loads of big cities. You have Liverpools, Manchesters, etc., etc. But in Ireland, is it Dublin and that's it, and the rest of the whole island, or is there other bigger centres at all?
Yes, I suppose there's Dublin. I suppose these cities are Dublin, Cork,
right.
Limerick, Galway,
Right.
and then us Southerners sort of ignore Northern Ireland, I suppose, because they're in pounds. Their
Yes,
legal
exactly.
system is different, their banking system. They're their own economy, if you like.
Yes.
So some of the guys in our groups obviously operate in Northern Ireland, and they'd have similar but different. But it's funny, I hear of people regularly moving to Dublin to focus on property. And my brain is thinking about the 2 million on the terraced house. Because I lived in the terraced house. My terraced house, I think, was €825,000. So you'd need to earn even more. And now it's a lovely area, and you have a bigger selection of restaurants and things than I have here.
Right.
But, of course, when you live anywhere for a while, you don't go every weekend. What happens is it's a novelty initially.
Yeah.
But when I hear people saying they're moving to Dublin, I'm almost horrified, Richard, because the level of competition. So I suppose most all of us are looking for distressed property.
Right.
We're not looking to pay top dollar off a beautiful 3D marketing campaign.
Yeah,
we're looking to rescue things and add value.
Yeah, where can we add value? That's right. Whether it's a conversion, expanding the space, or whether it's the condition, as you say, actually bringing it to life. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, in 1997-8, you just had to show up. I mean, I'd be, after doing the busy week at the desk job, I'd be literally scooting around on a Saturday putting deposits on things. You'd pay
fantastic.
€5,000 and the price froze. And it mightn't be delivered for 3 years. So I had even made some money flipping off-plan assignable contracts. So I'd never closed, never paid staff. It was easy. Do you know?
Yeah, just a different time. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
And I suppose even 5 years ago, I left Dublin 5 years ago after about 20 years. I was concerned myself. I said, I'll move to rural Ireland and there'll be no deals, and the rate of turnover is slow.
Yeah.
And houses are slower to sell.
Sure.
But it's much easier to have the best house in the town.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the competition levels are low.
Yeah, everything's relative, isn't it?
Everything is relative.
Yeah, totally. Brilliant stuff. Right, okay, let's start to jump into a wee bit of nitty gritty with you then, and pull apart what you know about this market. So I'm an investor. I want to look at things online, try and find some deals. Maybe there's some in the rural places we spoke about, etc. So over in the UK, I'm going to jump onto Rightmove. I'm going to jump onto your Zooplas and Mouse Prices and so on and so forth. What's the deal in Ireland when it comes to online portals and things? What do we use? And then after we spoke about that, let's have a wee chat about estate agents and how that market is and so on and so forth. So Rightmove in Ireland, does it exist at all?
Yeah, it does. It's called Daft or My Home.
There we go.
My Home would have been the original one.
Right.
And then Daft came along as a competitor. And it's funny, I will tend to use Daft. Their screens just seem easier and cleaner, and the app works well. And I have all my Daft alerts set up.
Okay. Your daft alerts, that sounds hilarious.
Daft alert.
Some daft alerts.
So you get a daft alert in the middle of the night to tell you
there's that famous Irish humour. I love that.
Yeah,
fantastic.
quick.
Yeah, because some of your pals, when they come over to the protege courses and so on with us, they talk to me about Property Pal and Property.ie and all sorts of wee different portals,
Yes.
but vaguely the same as kind of Rightmove and similar structures and so on.
Yes, and
Is it?
I
Yeah.
know a lot of people spend a lot more time. Say a guy now who I've been mentoring, he has devised a tool that will pull all the stuff off Daft in his area, and then it will compare it to median values in the area.
Right.
So it will highlight to him kind of what's below market value.
Excellent.
And I suppose I'm not over technical, but you can find somebody technical on Fiverr or Upwork to do everything in the whole world for you now.
Sure.
But I'm still a little bit, like I think you'll agree yourself, property is a people business.
Yes.
You know, to me, Daft in a way is only to tell me what agent is carrying what stock.
Gotcha.
I notice that the same person will have all the distressed things in a town.
Mm-hmm.
And he's my guy then.
Right, that's his
whether I like
speciality.
him or not, Richard.
Yeah, he'll soon get to like you. Yeah. So let's jump into that human part of the puzzle then. What's the deal with estate agent stuff? So again, over in the UK, we could say, well, it's funny, we went through a period of big, massive conglomerate estate agencies and you knew them and that's who you always went to and it was high street people. And then with the internet, everything else, oh my goodness, they're scattered everywhere. There's all sorts of online. There's the purple brixies of the world and all sorts of different flavours. There's maybe less high street estate agents, but there's more independent guys. I mean, what's the kind of feel in Ireland, would you say?
Yes, there's a lot. I suppose there's a few chains.
Right.
Who it appears that they own some of their offices and they franchise others. They probably franchise, like the Sherry Fitz and the DNGs and these. Right. Some of them are franchised operations. So the guy you're chatting to, it's his business effectively. Right. And he's using I suppose he's using all their marketing structure, their techniques and all of that. So right. we've those big agencies. And then you have maybe in every town that you have the 2 or 3 big ones, you probably have another 2 or 3. Right. Okay. And then only a couple of stragglers. Uh-huh. So even in some place like Cork or Limerick, now you have a good few in Dublin. Uh-huh. But in Dublin, then they'll be dominant in one area. So it's great. You don't have millions of people to befriend.
And do you find their structure are most of them like a fixed fee for selling, or some of them percentages? How do they kind of work that way?
Most all of them in Ireland will be a percentage with a minimum.
Right.
Because if they're in rural Ireland, there'll be stuff on at 50,000 or even sites at 30,000. So they couldn't make a living at 1%.
Right. Okay.
So there'll be maybe 1 to 1.5%. For some reason, I noticed they're expensive in Cork, of all places, or outside Cork. West Cork probably has a lot of foreign visitors and retirees, international retirees, and maybe they don't mind. But I'm often taken aback because I deal with insolvency cases all over Ireland because they're usually referred by a solicitor who's seen something I've done previously, or a friend of a friend was talking to somebody and Catherine dealt with that. So I see properties that I would never physically see in the car. I say, gosh, this is kind of a high. This is 2%. Who's paying this? Because normally in a bank assisted sale, we'll be asking the bank to pay all of the fees.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that we cannot clear the mortgage, we'll have to ask them to meet the legal estate agent and all of that. Yeah. So 1 to 1.5% is industry norm, with a minimum though, to protect them from doing a load of work on on something that's really not.
It's going to go for peanuts.
It's going to go for peanuts, and there's going to be an awful lot of viewing before it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Just to weigh up their time and the effort they're putting in. No, that makes sense. Okay. And when I'm doing my numbers and stuff, if I find a property, I've done my online, I've done my offline, start to do my due diligence on things. UK, stamp duty. I'm going to factor that in. It's a bit annoying. It's quite complex. Oh my goodness, am I buying in England? Am I buying in Scotland? There's a difference. Okay, okay, up to that value, it's this percent, and then over that value, it's this. But oh my goodness, and obviously we try and help the people we work with calculators and so on and so forth. What's the deal in Ireland?
Yes, it's lovely and simple now here in the Republic. We're only at 1% now, which has to be the lowest it's ever been, up to €1 million.
Right up to $1 million, is it? Wow.
Up to $1 million, where I remember back in the it would have been early 2000s probably, when I moved to the elusive terrace house in the nice area, which had to pay 125. The garage was another €100,000.
Cool.
Stamp duty was at 9%.
Wow.
Stamp duty would have bought another house.
That's incredible.
In some place in the UK or rural Ireland.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
It was enormous.
See, I knew this conversation was going to fascinate me. I love the stuff you can learn from people. It's just brilliant.
Yes.
Especially some of your
1% is great. So if you've one for an agent and one for stamp, entering and exiting flips is not the end of the world.
No, exactly. It's a nice easy thing to ramp up.
Yes, where I've done one or two in Portugal, and the entry and exit cost would just be prohibitive. I mean, an agent is 4 to 5%.
Wow.
So you'd have to hand over €5,000 on something you're only selling for 100. And I mean, you might have paid 70 for it months ago, but there's no credit. So you really cannot hop in and out of deals somewhere that there's that level of fees.
Yeah. See, this is the perils of you having a global empire. This is the problem, Catherine. Your arms wrapped around the globe.
Tight there and weather us.
Now, you touched upon banking earlier on. Let's have a wee quick chat about that area then, because obviously UK, we're looking at things. We've got the kind of residential lending areas. I can go and get, just a residential mortgage. I can speak to people about getting a buy-to-let mortgage, very specific. We've got commercials, we've got bridging loans, so on and so forth. Do you feel you've got the same range of products involved? And do you see any big differences between, the loan to values? Again, just very simplistic. We would expect to put in a 25% deposit, although obviously with the current market as it is just now, with this coronavirus going on, all sorts of things are changing. But in general, we would throw down a 25% deposit. We've got special support packages for first-time buyers that they don't have to go to that level, etc. What's the differences when it comes to Ireland when you compare those things?
I think actually we're not a million miles different. People often assume, because it's in our nature to think that things are easier for other people. I think it's more of a human nature than a rational market. It's okay for you. Has to be the favourite phrase. Even as all precursors say to protege and things that you can't do that where I am. And you say, well, no, I said, be honest with me. What you actually mean is I'm a lazy git and I prefer to go home and sit on the sofa and watch Netflix and say, oh, I tried. It wasn't applicable to Ireland.
Yeah.
So we're not that different. There's some people doing 80% buy-to-lets. Most of the kind of the ones who let you get a bit of volume going are 70%. They're 65% within a company.
Right.
The tougher thing I think is we've only one interest-only product in the whole market now.
Really?
And of course, building a buy-to-let portfolio, to get a cash flow positive one, it's very hard to pay capital and interest, plus maintenance, plus letting, plus voids, and come out cash flow positive while you're paying a capital. So that's one thing that makes cash flow hard.
Okay.
But I do think our yields are very high now. So even in like in the UK, I hear people talking about kind of 5 to 10 that there's places at 5 that people are still investing at 5-6% yield, and they're maybe expecting a yield, a low yield and high growth, or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could be at 10% yield nearly anywhere in Ireland now.
Wow.
Which is a big turnaround for the books. Sometimes when people say to you that everything is going to happen again, why are you so calm? it's all going to go bad again. I said, well, there's nobody with more experience. Aside from my own troubles, I'm at about 410 insolvencies. There's nothing I don't know about when it goes wrong.
That's it.
But actually, we're at double the rent. I was at roughly 4.5% rent when I ran into difficulties, and I'd say I was at 105% mortgage.
Right, okay.
You know,
gotcha.
Whereas you will not be allowed to get beyond 75, 80 now. And even if you try and add something new to your portfolio, they'll be having a back look at what's already there. And even in quieter areas, you'll be at 9 or 10% rent.
Wow.
If you bought at the current price. Now, if you have it 15 years and you overpaid for it.
Yeah, exactly.
That has to be that. But it is a bit of a killer, the no interest only. So you either get approved by ICS Bank, which trade as Dillis, or you're not getting an interest only product.
Wow, really? That's incredible. There you go. It's all these wee subtle things. It's funny. So valuations. Let's jump into that. From down in England, I've got... Sometimes there's a wee surveyor report, you know. Sometimes it's just the lender that would do their own valuation, etc. Up in Scotland, we've got a very special thing with the home report, you know. So every property sold, if it's sold on the market, has to come with this. The seller pays for it. It's quite kind of detailed, lots of characteristics about the condition of the property. There's a valuation figure put on there by a surveyor, someone who's continually doing these things, and you can argue back and forth about how accurate they are. Some see it as a fantastic tool because it gives you a lot of peace of mind. Some see it, well, for some investors, it's making you a wee bit lazy. You should be doing your own due diligence, etc. But, you know, for the most part, it's there as a positive. What's the deal in Ireland with valuations, things on market, surveyors, etc.?
Well, anything goes. We're probably easier on seller investors, as I'll call it.
Right.
Myself and yourself trying to sell things and break ceiling prices.
Right.
Because we've no home report. It's a bit of a disadvantage when you're buying. Yes. Because our comparables, so say we talked there about finding things. So, but along with finding things on your right move, you're able to see stuff in the area. The world of comparables in Ireland is a bit grey because we have a online portal now called the Property Price Register. Right. So you can look up, Park Road, Swinford, County Mayo. But it won't tell you whether it was a 1-bed house or a 5-bed mansion. So you have to manually then try and fathom out what that one sold this date for 100 grand. What condition was that in? And if the ad is now gone off the agent's portal, you've very little way to track. So our comparables are poor. So if you're going buying, you're a little bit wide open. Yeah. No home report, and most people would only use a valuer. So a valuer, I don't even know, is a valuer and a surveyor the same thing in Ireland and the UK actually. So a valuer just walks in. They wouldn't know. No offense to any valuers. What they're doing, you or I could do. Right. They walk in with a clipboard. They have a look online. They say, this is the square meterage. It's roughly in this zone. Okay. So the bank will insist on a valuer before they lend. Right.
And is it always their own, or are these valuers just independent third-party people anyway?
They're usually off a panel in the bank.
Right, gotcha.
And I have now learnt, you see, when I'm trying to solve insolvency cases, I want the pessimistic valuer. Yes. Because I have a client who owes 300 grand. I think the house is worth 150. Yeah. And I want to refinance 150. Yep. So I have learnt that some of them let you pick your own. They send a list of valuers. Right. And they say, ring one of these guys. They're on our preferred supplier list, or they're one of our valuers.
Gotcha.
and others will arrange and send.
Okay.
Now, usually with a purchase, they'll arrange and send, and it'll be added, like €127 will be added to your bill, or up to €250, depending on. But they are not that many people, in my experience, get an actual proper survey done, which I feel is the basis of your home report.
Gotcha. Exactly. It is.
Because I've had sales fall out of bed when a surveyor comes, because a survey is a detailed, it would be like if you're looking at buying a business and you really send a forensic accountant to go through.
Yeah.
You're going to see things that they didn't point out because they're trying to sell.
That's right.
So I have lost sales, for example, when a surveyor has come and said, I've gone upstairs and the attic is not separated from next door. In theory, this is a semi-detached house, and the people from next door could be living in your attic. They could be flooring the whole.
I know the Irish like to party, but that's ridiculous. Come on.
Instead of separating the attic, I just say to my agent, who the guy I use in Dublin is brilliant, just go back to the market. The next person won't get a survey. And they obviously didn't pop their head up the trapdoor either.
Oh my goodness.
So a valuer is a very rough thing. It's what you or I would do, from comparables, from.
Gotcha.
Where a survey, I think our sales wouldn't go along as nicely as they do if we had the home report situation.
Right.
But it's really funny, like everything in life, Richard. People don't mind borrowing 250 grand to give to you, but they sure as hell don't want to pay that 350 quid out of their own money.
It's so true. It's so true. The way we look at things is just hilarious. So let's say we were going for the purchase. We were happy with everything. We found it. We're going ahead. What about the legal process? What about that part of the puzzle coming in? Because, again, you can look at UK and you can say, well, it's funny. I mean, down in England, they've got a problem and a trap and a risk with this gazumping, and people can still, you think you've got a deal, you think you've got a contract, and then bang, someone can pull the carpet out from under you. Up in Scotland, you've got a lot of protection that would stop that from happening. There's a process that's a bit long-winded. It can take a number of weeks to go through. We're talking about exchanging contracts. Someone would call it exchanging missives, so on and so forth, Some people complain about it, about how slow solicitors are. There's, the buyer and the sellers are trying to cross things over in the old post, etc. What's the deal with Ireland? Similar? Differences?
Yes. Probably similar to Scotland. We're slower than the UK.
Right.
So we're on manual contracts and manual exchanges and closings.
Right.
Which is what brings in the delays.
Right.
And more cost. I mean, I remember buying a new apartment in the UK once, and it said legal fees £350. And at the time I was paying probably 2,500 plus that. What?
Yeah.
But they had just such volume.
Right.
That they had a solicitor who would do in one of the big firms. But of course, England is electronic land registry. We're not, and no. I don't know. I presume Scotland maybe isn't either. They physically.
No, that's right. Funnily enough, again, just to date stamp this particular interview, if someone's watching this podcast in the future, this is during the times of the coronavirus that we're all suffering just now, and it's because of that. It's because of the lockdowns and the shutdowns that only now the registrars of Scotland have started a whole programme of trying to move everything from that manual paper process to digital. They're actually being forced into it by the environment, if you like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because one of my first cousins in the UK, his wife is a legal exec who does closings.
Right.
She would be expected to do maybe 35, 40 conveyances in a week.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, I used to practice manage a conveyances solicitor's office for an interim spell. Mm-hmm. And if we could get them to do 3 a week, we were nearly clapping. We were delighted.
Yeah.
So it just shows you that even if they're only charging £600 a pop, they're getting far more done because it's electronic.
Gotcha.
So people do give out endlessly about solicitors.
Yeah.
And I suppose I'd always in Ireland have a few tips. We've a lot more mixed solicitors. So what I mean by that is I'll only deal with someone who conveyances only. Because if he's gone to deal with the speeding ticket on that's a big piece, I'd say, of the delay problem.
Wow, really?
Is the guys in the smaller places have to do all the business to keep their business ticking over.
Interesting.
And as we know, and you're a time management nut as I am, Richard, when you break your stride, it's not just that hour and a half when you went to court.
That's
you met
right.
someone, you started talking about something else. Whereas there's flow. If you've got 20 conveyances on your desk,
that's right.
Flow.
Very true.
Our guys can't even draft a contract till they collect deeds.
Right.
The deeds will be with the bank.
Uh-huh.
Nobody seems to think to ask for their deeds while they're marketing the property. You know, they don't ask until they have a sale agreed.
Right.
And then they're given out. The solicitor doesn't even have the bloody deed. Like, how can he do anything, or she?
Oh my goodness. And then what is that causing? What are you finding the average time scale is? What do you kind of budget in your head as a time scale?
Now, I'd say, I suppose, a good closing is 10 weeks. But they go on 6 months on occasion.
Oh my goodness.
It wouldn't be every, lost deeds are common enough.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, I have a bank assisted one at the moment and the deeds are lost. And the owner is funny. He's a really savvy man. He knows where they are, but he said, I'm damned if I'm telling the bank where they've lost my deeds. Because he said, I'm collecting my rent and we're on a payment holiday because he has agreed to let them do their jobs.
Oh, brilliant. That is brilliant.
So we're slower, but
Yeah.
we're not really, we don't have gazumping problems because
Right.
once you pay an agent, you're usually maybe €5,000. It's fully refundable until signing a contract, which I
Right.
think is similar to yourself.
Yeah.
And to be fair, agents are very good. Even if they verbally say your $5,000 is on the way,
Uh-huh.
your sale agreed now.
You're covered there, right? Okay, that's fair enough. That's fascinating. So it is. Now, oh my goodness, I'm taking a sharp intake of breath. I've left this one till last deliberately, and it's a word beginning with T, and it's pronounced tax. Now, just to explain to the listeners and the viewers, why would I take? Why? What's the problem, Richard? Well, I have learned the hard way through dealing with the beautiful Irish people that come in, they work with us through our property protege course, and like yourself, you're up at the higher level, the Platinum Inner Circle course. Any time that word is mentioned, it's like a swear word for the Irish. You are fascinated by it. It's incredible. I mean, nobody likes giving to the government, but my goodness, the Irish seem to have a beautiful, focus on it, shall we say. So when it comes to tax, when it comes to things, factoring stuff in, capital gains tax, this, that and the other, what's the deal in Ireland? What do we need to factor in?
Yes, I wonder if why people are extra crazy about it. I'd be saying to them, but you're not going paying tax unless you make a profit.
Exactly.
Honestly, if you can make a profit plus you really need to be doing training courses nowadays. You're going to Protégé, you're going to Glasgow, people spend €40,000 here on a degree that they'll be qualified to stack the shelves in Tesco.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh my God, I just spend $3,500 on a training course for a job that they can probably easily do 80,000 a year, even in a rural area. You should be able to generate that type of money, flipping, packaging, etc. So I said, don't worry, there's no tax until you've paid your training, your motor and travel, all of this. I think maybe what the trigger is in Ireland is that we don't have many landlords who are just landlords, because we have a problem getting lending if you don't have another job.
Gotcha.
So I forgot that bit in a way when we hit on lending. So they're already paying 50p in the pound on something. So I think if the resentfulness comes from the fact this is a side income or a second income,
Yeah, gotcha. And then there's
Um,
another range of tax coming. Oh my
exactly.
goodness. Yeah.
And they somehow we feel because we're doing something extra
Yeah,
that it
gotcha.
should be somehow exempt.
Yeah.
Um, so there are, I suppose, there's three ways roughly how people hold property in Ireland. All three can borrow.
Right.
So there's personally, which would be the default, and
Mhm.
all of the accidental landlords, the house was already in their own name before they even realised they'd have to rent it.
Yeah.
That they either couldn't afford to live there or their family outgrew the house, and so they had to. So they're in income tax zone, which once you get over a certain level, but it's of profit.
Yeah.
You don't have a profit is the simple. But I used to do tax returns, and I'm quite amazed how few people. I keep every receipt, every biro and pencil I buy for my office.
Yeah.
You have a laptop, a PC. You have so much expense relating to these things, but people don't seem to keep receipts. They're just not in the good habits.
That's it. Then it trips them up later on down the line.
Trips them up later.
Yeah.
So that's the worst regime really, is to own them yourself. But of course, you have full freedom, full flexibility.
Yeah.
Number two would be a company. We probably shy away a little bit. Borrowing levels are a little bit lower, and the fear of running the company. Now, running the companies is very similar to conveyances. We're 2 to 3 times dearer than the UK.
Right.
Because
Okay.
they have these huge accountancy firms who'll do like your returns for £500 a year. You are probably talking 1,500 in Ireland. But I would even say to people, if 2 friends are doing flips, sure, 2 or 3 people could run stuff through a company. And you're just manually apportioning. This was your deal, you're entitled to draw out. And anything you draw out will attract income tax. But just make sure you're claiming all your expenses. You know, every single expense related to driving to Dublin, going to the airport, staying in a hotel, you're going to another network event. And I think that's often what people aren't doing.
Gotcha.
We do a certain amount of people in Ireland, but I would say in Ireland it is more the need a substantial enough pension fund.
Right.
But there are people holding property and pensions. Just because it's different to the UK, they probably need a bit more.
Right, fair enough.
It is funny. They don't. You go to work and you're deducted the tax, and nobody argues. And it seems that when you have to willingly hand it over yourself,
you've got to pay. That's right. It's that pain.
Huge problem with that.
Now, did you say there was a third way of looking at it?
I suppose there's personal, company, or pension.
Oh, the pension. That's the third one.
It just won't suit everyone.
Gotcha. It's an individual thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
but again, like there's lots to be spent on housing, you know, and it's only whatever profit you're making at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's good. That wasn't as painful as I feared it would be. It's good that you're one of the level-headed Irish people.
Exactly. Keep spending. Keep updating your computer.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to be respectful of this young lady's time and bring us to a close here, because my goodness, she gave a lot away for you folks listening in. Absolutely tremendous. Now, remember, people listening in, people watching, make sure you subscribe to the show and you'll keep updated with all these fantastic interviews that come out. Make sure you go to the show notes as well. You know, when it's safe to do so, click on your podcast player, go to the link, and all of Catherine's details are there so that you'll be able to follow her, you can connect to her, and of course, if you need any help and assistance with some of the business that she does, then reach out to her and get in touch. You've heard how knowledgeable she is, so make sure you do that. You are now going to leave us, listeners and viewers of This Week in Property. You have to, because myself and Catherine, we're going to continue to talk in a special little bonus episode that we're going to be putting together for the tribe, the people that we have inside our Property Protégé programme. This is one of the many wee bonuses that those fantastic folks have. Now, if property investing is an interest to you, if you would fancy that kind of support and wee bonus features, then have a wee look at the website, propertyprotege.com. You'll see what I'm talking about there, because those are the special people that's about to hear what's coming next. next. But for your time listening to us today, thank you for tuning in, and you can find us on the next show. And Catherine, for those beautiful people that have heard us, thank you so much for everything that you've given them today. I'm sure they really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for your time today on This Week in Property.
Thank you, Richard.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. Remember, with the guests that you just saw, go into the show notes for the page because all of their links are there so that you can get in touch and to get more information. And talking about getting more information, more guests, more insights, more knowledge, etc., make sure you're subscribed. Get the subscription done, get the notifications on, and then we'll always keep in touch with you every single time a brand new show is going to come out. So thanks for tuning to This Week in Property.